Hey guys, Jeff again. Obviously, right? Who else would it be? Okay, so first or second video, I guess. But the first situation or grieving, whatever you want to call it, event, I guess, maybe it's a good word. About 4 years ago, maybe five, my mother passed away. And I've technically she would have been our stepmother, but she raised me from the time I was about three. And we're not going to get into all the particulars about what happened with my parents and that kind of stuff. That's all long ago, and bridge under the or water under the bridge, whatever that's called. But anyways, she raised me since I was three, and so again, she's earned that right to be called mom. Period. The end. And so she passed away about 4.5, maybe 5 years ago. I can't remember exactly which because I kind of compartmentalize and put things away for a while. My wife will be able to tell me exactly how long it's been. But that was the first grieving event when she passed away. Now, mom was larger than life. Her personality was just infectious. She never met a stranger. She was never afraid to talk to anybody. She is from the South. She was born and raised in New Orleans. And that influenced so much of the way that we were raised and how she saw the world. But she was larger than life and very demonstrative with her emotions, both good and bad, for various reasons. And but she lived with her heart on her sleeve, and she led with that. And she had a very hard life growing up, very troubled life growing up, and had suffered some atrocities that they're just mind blowing. Um, anyways, but she had struggled with her health probably our whole life that we were involved. Um, so she was diagnosed as a diabetic probably 28, maybe 30 years ago. But I believe that she was probably a diabetic long before that, and they just never diagnosed her with it. I think she had some of the classic symptoms, but nobody picked up on it. Wonderful military doctors, yay. Um, also believe that she had some signs of early onset dementia. And I don't know if she was diagnosed with that. I do know that she um, did have depression issues and did have some emotional issues just because, again, of her childhood trauma. But I also know that she had COPD and congestive heart failure, diabetes again. She also had battles with breast cancer twice. And so she beat it the first time for about 12 years. But ultimately, in the end, it came back a second time. And I believe that was probably the leading cause for her death. But it's funny when you have a parent or somebody in your family that's ailing, that's sickly. You start to make peace with it, I think. Well, at least I did. Anyways, I made peace with the fact that I knew that before too long that God was going to call her home, and you started to get used to the idea. When you start to see that she's not who she used to be, didn't have the same abilities that she used to have. She was a great cook and just sharp, very, very sharp, always on top of things. I think I get my gift of sarcasm from her. And just some things you just notice that they're not the same as they used to be. And then you start to see some of the health issues compound themselves. So, probably about a year or two before her actual passing, I had already made peace with the fact that it was coming. You don't never know when, and so you don't know if it's a day, a year, a week, a month, or how long it's going to be, but you just know and you see the signs and you know it's not going to be too terribly much longer. So I don't know if it was the way we were raised with leaving people every 2.5, 3 years, that you start to prep yourself for that before it happens. You know it's coming, and so you start to accept it before it gets there, so that when the event actually happens, you're pretty much in control of yourself and your emotions and what's going on with it. And so when mom's passing came, it was not a surprise. I don't think to anybody it was a surprise. Um, but it's still a loss, right? It's still a hole in your life, especially with somebody with her personality. But she had a series of events right before she passed where she was in and out of the hospital. Um, and so the last time when she went to the hospital, we live about an hour away from the hospital that she went to. And so when we got the phone call, I knew halfway through the drive that she had passed. I don't know how you explain it, but I just knew that she was already gone. And when we got there, and we were greeted by my oldest brother, and I could tell by the expression on his face that she had passed. He was blessed to be able to spend, him and his wife, to spend the night before she passed with her at home, and spend that time with her. And that's such a blessing for him. I don't hold any personal regrets for not being there. Again, I think I'd already made peace with the fact that she was going to be passing. And I'm so glad he was able to be there with her. That was monumental, I think, for him and for her. Um, so with with her passing, though, I think I kind of compartmentalized it. Her funeral was her funeral. I didn't spend a lot of time up the casket. I didn't spend a lot of time talking to people. But I mean, how do you deal with those things when you've never dealt with them before? So I experienced death before. My best friend died when she was, I think, 19, in a car accident. So death was not unfamiliar to me, but when it's your mom, it's a whole different story. Um, but with that grief, I kind of just internalized it, and the way I see grief, the way I've seen grief up to now, and probably will still in the future, is, to me, it's like a vase that has kind of a bottom on it that allows water to dissipate out the bottom. It's not solid, right? The only word I can come up with, osmosis, and that's not right. I can't think of the word right now. But anyways, it's a container, and so your grief goes into it. But even if you hold it for a while, it's going to dissipate. It's going to come out the bottom, and it absorbs and dissipates and goes away. Not that you don't have grief, not that you don't recognize it, but it just kind of dissipates on its own as it goes. And so when mom passed, it kind of there's some grief in that grief container. There's a little bit of grieving to it. It wasn't, for me, it was not the crying and the snot slinging and that kind of stuff. It wasn't that kind of grief for me. But again, I already made peace with it, so I was able to just deal with it in bits and pieces. And there's still times today where you see something, you hear something, you smell something, and you just go, "Oh, that's mom." Yeah, the other night we were watching a cooking show on PBS, and the chef, he was from New Orleans, and so he was making all these dishes with all the ingredients that I knew what he was going to use, right? So I'm listening to him talk about the dish he's going to make, and I'm like, "Yep, I know what you're putting in that. Between the garlic and the celery and the onions and the bell pepper and this and that, you just know." And that was a gift from mom, and that was her blessing to us. Is her legacy was her cooking and her food, and that's when I feel the most closest to her, and I felt her that night. But at that point when she was passing, when she passed, it was like, okay, all right, it happened. And I think my dad was kind of the same way. He had he'd come to terms with her passing, but he'd also been her caretaker for probably the 12 years, the last 12 years of their marriage. So that grief kind of went into my grief container, and I held it for a little bit, but it was controlled and kind of dissipated, and kind of took care of itself. Like I said, every once in a while you get something, you'd be like, oh my gosh, and it would last a couple minutes, and then it goes away. So, um, but again, it's one of those things you learn to deal with it, and that's why I deal with mom. I just learn to deal with it, and let it go at that. But you're not expecting other grieving events to happen as quickly. And I understand through all these videos, I am not saying that it's not a woe is me. It's not a pity me. It's not a pity party. There are people out there who have just immensely worse than this, that have just tragic, tragic losses and grief. But this is just for me, and how I dealt with it. And this will touch to somebody. It will reach out to somebody. I have faith in God that this is why He wants it done. We don't live our lives for ourselves. We live them for somebody else, and we don't go through the trials we go through just for ourselves. We go through them to bring others along and to walk beside them through those same events. We've been there. We've done that. We have to speak from that place of authority. We only get the authority if we've been through it. Kind of the reason why God sent Jesus back to earth was that we had to believe that He knew what we were talking about. He knew our pain and our struggle and the weights that we carry and the battles we fought. And if He didn't, we would not have given Him credibility. And so that's, I believe, why He went through the testing. And so the temptations, everything else like that that's spoken about in the Bible, He went through those because He needed to understand, and we needed to understand that He knew what we were going through. So anyways, so please don't misunderstand any of this in the videos. This is not a pity party type of deal. It is just hey, listen, this is going to reach to somebody, and when it does, just know that I'm going to be available to talk or to listen, if nothing else. All right. Okay. So that's the first grieving process, is mom passing, and that partial filling up the grieving container, and then that dissipating out. So we'll leave it there for this one. Again, comments are always welcome. Reach out, text me, put something in the video below the video. That's fine, whatever. And we'll just go from there. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later. Ciao, Bella.